I, Dennis K., have always been proud of my life. I have a wonderful, faithful wife, 2 wonderful children, and a beautiful home that we have managed to purchase. All of this I could confidently state until a couple months ago. However, one incident made me reconsider many things. That day started out as usual. I came home from work, tired but full of anticipation for an evening with Tina. We had planned to spend it as a couple, which was a rarity for us. The kids were staying with my parents. On the kitchen table were Tina's car keys and purse. My wife's phone was flashing its LED light, signaling missed messages. Tina was in the bathroom when I entered the house. Suddenly, the ringing sounded. An unknown number was glowing on the screen. With some hesitation, I decided to answer it. A male voice cheerfully said, "Hello, Tina, it's me." His tone seemed ominously familiar. He continued, "Your birthday is in 2 weeks, and I would like to meet you at our hotel. I've missed you." The last words were spoken with a hint of doubt. "Tina, can you hear me, baby?" The voice repeated, and I hung up abruptly. Standing with the phone in my hand, I tried to make sense of what I'd heard. My heart was beating faster and faster. I didn't want to believe my intuition. Glancing at the screen, I saw an unread message icon. My sense of unease only increased. The message read, "Call me when you're free." The thought that this man could be my wife's lover raised many questions in my mind. I put the phone back on the table. Tina came out of the bathroom with only a towel wrapped around her. "God, how long have you been back?" she asked. "Hey, sweetie, I just got here looking for you," I replied. We hugged and exchanged kisses. I then headed for the shower, trying to regain my composure. The water didn't feel as refreshing as it usually did. Thoughts of the phone call kept me awake. I tried to convince myself that it was just a mistake or a misunderstanding. But the more I thought about it, the heavier my heart became. Part of me desperately didn't want to believe that my wife, with whom I had lived with for over a decade, could cheat and betray me. But another part was already beginning to doubt. After I finished washing myself, I looked at myself in the mirror. The reflection showed a middle-aged man with a beer belly and tired eyes. What should I do about this phone call? How should I behave with Tina? Should I ask her directly or try to find out the truth on my own? I got out of the shower and saw Tina sitting at the kitchen table typing something on the phone. "Are you okay? You seem distracted," she asked. "Yeah, I'm fine. I just had a rough day," I replied. We sat down to eat. The plan was to watch a movie, but I wasn't in the mood. So I went straight to my room and went to bed. Tina stayed in the living room and promised to come back later. After yesterday's incident, I spent the entire day at work feeling on edge. My usual tasks that required concentration and attention seemed impossible to accomplish. Thoughts of that phone call haunted me, giving me no peace of mind. One of my coworkers noticed my condition and decided to ask, "Dennis, are you okay? You look terrible. I need some advice," I replied. I told my coworker about the events of the previous day. He listened to me and stated that a direct conversation with my wife was impossible. He reminded me of the joint property and the house, emphasizing the need to gather evidence. His advice was to hire a private investigator to strengthen my position in the event of a divorce. Although I was not comfortable following up with my wife, I still wanted to make sure the call was genuine. Returning home marked a strange evening. Tina and I chatted about daily chores, discussing weekend plans. At the same time, I couldn't help but analyze her every word and gesture, looking for hidden signals. Tina seemed not to notice anything or masterfully pretended to. Late that night, when Tina had already gone to bed, I was alone in the living room. I pondered my next steps. The next day, I began my search for a private investigator. There were many suggestions on the internet, but my choice fell on Tammy Holt. She had excellent references and specialized in family cases. I called and made an appointment. Tina was at work and I had the day off. I planned to meet with the detective first, then pick up the kids from their parents and return home. When I walked into Tammy Holt's office, the first thing that caught my eye was the cozy, almost home-like atmosphere. There were certificates and thank you letters from clients hanging on the walls, and pictures of smiling people on a shelf. It was strange to see this, because usually detective work leads to broken families, but here people were smiling. Tammy greeted me with a warm smile. She was a middle-aged woman with a shrewd eye and confidence in every word and movement. I shared with Tammy my suspicions about the phone call that had led me to approach her. She listened intently, nodded her head, and took notes. After I finished, Tammy asked a few questions about Tina and our life together. She wondered if I had noticed any changes in her behavior lately. I tried to think of anything that might indicate cheating, but every fact seemed far-fetched and unconvincing. Tammy promised me complete confidentiality and professionalism. She explained how the investigation would proceed and warned me that the results might not be what I expected. Referring to statistics, she mentioned that about 90% of the time, evidence of infidelity can be found. This did not make me happy. "Don't write or call. I'll get back to you when it's done," she said. I asked her to let me know the initial results of the investigation within 2 weeks, as my wife's birthday was due in 2 weeks. Leaving Tammy's office, I felt a strange sense of relief. I went to my parents' house to pick up my children, Jeffrey and Larry, who were twins, and drove them home. Surprisingly, my parents didn't notice anything unusual in my behavior, and I decided it was for the best. Once back home, I had plenty of time to set up the cameras as Tammy had requested. I didn't want to do it, but for the sake of our family, I decided to install 2 cameras, one in the living room and one in our bedroom. Then I tried to distract myself. With each day since my visit with Tammy Holt, my sense of reality gradually faded, giving way to constant anxiety and anticipation of news from Tammy. I continued to go about my normal life, going to work, talking to Tina as if nothing was happening, but inside everything was different. Tina's birthday was approaching and I had no idea what to do. Tammy recommended that I continue to live my normal life and try not to give away my anxiety. "The more natural you act, the easier it will be to gather evidence," she said. Those words became my mantra for the following weeks. One morning as I was leaving for work, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked across the street. A woman was sitting behind the wheel, leaning on something in the passenger seat. When I got in the car and looked up, the car was gone, as if it had never existed. I realized it was probably Tammy doing her job. Several days passed before Tammy contacted me again. She invited me to her office to discuss the progress of the investigation. The meeting was scheduled for late afternoon to minimize the risk of being seen together. In Tammy's office, she met me with a serious expression on her face. On the desk in front of her were several folders and a laptop computer. "I have something interesting for you. I've managed to gather quite a bit of material over the past week and a half," she began, wasting no time with preliminary information. Tammy showed me a series of photos and videos that showed Tina and Peter, who I didn't expect to see in the photos. Peter was my own brother, 4 years younger than me, and he had been seen with my wife in various places: coffee shops, parks, hotels, even leaving the gym, and, my God, right in our own home. My heart stopped when I saw those images. Tammy also had a video of Tina and Peter having sex in my house on the living room couch. At that moment, I remembered a voice from my wife's phone that sounded insanely familiar, and I realized it reminded me of Peter, that lying __. After Tammy finished her presentation, she looked at me quietly, waiting for a reaction. I couldn't speak, a storm of emotions raging through my body. Anger, betrayal, and sadness filled my head, but most of all I felt empty. The life I had known seemed to be gone, leaving behind only rubble. "What are you going to do?" Tammy asked, interrupting my thoughts. "I have no idea, but I'll figure something out," I replied, holding out an envelope of money to her. I then drove silently out of the office. Sitting in the car after my meeting with Tammy, I felt completely drained. It was starting to get dark outside. It felt like an eternal darkness had settled in my soul. I needed time to sort out my thoughts and decide how to proceed. I started the car and drove aimlessly, letting the city streets lead me. Unbeknownst to me, my speedometer hit the 75 miles per hour mark and I was hurtling toward the cliff. I quickly realized what was happening and began to slow down, stopping right at the edge. I got out of the car, feeling the cold wind hit my face. I just couldn't believe what I had just found out. My own brother was sleeping with my wife. What a nightmare, I thought to myself as I looked through the pictures. This seemed like a real disaster. I tried to remember any hints, but there were none. Even now, knowing the truth, I realized that I would never have known if it hadn't been for that random phone call. When I got home, suddenly a call from Tina disturbed my thoughts. "Hello, darling. When will you be home?" I asked. Tina said I would be home soon, but her words no longer seemed warm and comforting to me. I realized that I wanted to teach these two rascals a lesson, and I would do it during Tina's birthday party, which was to be held in a few days at our house surrounded by family. We divide our birthdays into two celebrations. One day we celebrate with relatives, and the other day we celebrate with friends. Back home, I went about my normal life, and honestly, it was challenging because I knew all the details. Tina's birthday came. The day was sunny and warm, as if nature couldn't reflect the chaos that was about to unfold today. Preparations for the evening were in full swing, and I tried to help Tina by playing the role of a caring husband. Although every one of my movements was imbued with inner struggle and the betrayal I was about to reveal, we set up the tables in the garden and decorated them with flowers and lanterns. Tina was delighted. She laughed and joked, seemingly carefree and happy. Watching her, I caught myself thinking that in other circumstances I would have shared her joy. But now, this happiness seemed foreign to me. By evening, everything was ready. All the relatives had gathered, our parents, siblings, and children. I noticed Peter. For a moment, our gazes met. I read the nervousness in his eyes, but he quickly hid it, exchanging the usual greetings with me and the other guests. He walked over to Tina, handed her a bouquet of flowers, and kissed her on the cheek. At that moment, I almost threw up. I felt my anger at him replaced by a determination to follow through. "Brother, it's been so long since we've seen each other. How are you?" Peter started to approach me. I coldly and indefinitely replied that I was fine, and he backed away from me. Once the traditional toasts came up, as the husband of the birthday girl, I was to make the first toast. I stood up, picked up my glass of champagne, and looked at those gathered. All eyes were on me. I began by thanking all my relatives for coming to share this day with us, for their warm words and wishes. Then my gaze stopped on Tina. She was looking at me with love and hope, unaware of the impending storm. "Tina, you are the light of my life, and I will always be grateful for the years we spent together," I began, and my heart ached with pain at every word. The guests took my words as an expression of deep love. Their gazes were filled with warmth and tenderness. I took out a remote projector from my jacket that I had specially set up to show a grand show. "So I have prepared a little gift for you, my dear, which I think everyone will definitely like." I finished my speech and pressed a button, turning on the projector. I had prepared a 5-minute video beforehand and turned it on. We met back in college. Back then, you could say we were going through a rough patch. We were both unemployed and penniless. But I'm glad we were able to pull through and create a real, fulfilling family with our wonderful boys. We had our ups and downs, but through all the hardships we made it through together. And what I've always loved about our relationship is that we tell each other the truth and have never lied. I was telling while the projector displayed pictures from our past. These images showed how our family started. I saw Tina sitting at the table. She was smiling. I talked about our life together. 3 minutes passed and a caption appeared on the screen, the result of so much hard work. Before the compromising photos appeared on the screen, I added the following: "This was a bright part of our life together, but unfortunately, we are not angels and each of us has a dark side." All the guests were instantly very interested. The first shot of Tina and Peter sitting in a cafe just talking appeared on the screen. The guests didn't understand at first, but I could see the two starting to get nervous. The next shot was more revealing. The photo clearly showed Peter and Tina walking hand in hand and entering the hotel. Subsequent shots showed them hugging and kissing. The cherry on top was a 15-second video from my house showing Peter and Tina having sex. I kept quiet and just watched the reactions of the guests. Everyone was whispering amongst themselves and looking at Tina and Peter. Tina stood up, pale as chalk. Her eyes were full of tears and bewilderment. "Dennis, what are you doing?" Her voice trembled. "Dear guests, I love you all very much. Thank you for your time. This is all from me," I said, ending the sepulchral silence. The guests interjected, shifting their gazes from me to Tina, not knowing how to react. Peter stood back, his face impassive. The first reaction came from Tina's father, who walked confidently up to Peter and silently punched him in the face. The blow was so hard that Peter barely stayed on his feet. Tina cried, not realizing what was happening or what she should do in such a situation. But no one came to her. Meanwhile, my parents got up from the table, walked over to Peter, who was trying to stop his nose from bleeding, grabbed him and took him away. There was no excuse for his action. After my revelation, Everything became clear and the evening came to an abrupt end. Some of the guests, not knowing how to react, began to leave, leaving behind silence and tension. Tina tried to talk to me, but I couldn't listen to her excuses. I felt drained, as if all the energy had left me the moment I decided to reveal the truth. I needed time. That was all I could say before I walked into the house, leaving her standing amongst the confused guests. I went to gather my things and saw our children playing with the other children in the living room, blissfully unaware of what had just happened. It was for the best. I quickly gathered my things and was heading to the car, about to leave for the motel, when I was stopped by my father. "I understand you, but you shouldn't be in such a hurry. You need to talk to her. Don't leave her alone, especially with the kids," he said. I realized that leaving was a really stupid idea. No one could know how Tina would react after the exposure. All the guests left after about an hour. I cleaned up the backyard while Tina sat in the living room. She tried several times to start a conversation with me, but I made it clear that I wasn't ready to communicate with her right now. The night passed sleeplessly, and the next morning the house was plunged into silence. Tina spent the night in the guest room, and we tried to avoid each other. I spent the day thinking about how we should proceed. I realized that our marriage was probably over, but we were facing a lot of practical issues related to the kids, the house, and our life together. I realized that I didn't want to live with a man who was cheating on me. Peter tried to contact me to explain everything. Tina's father seriously beat him to it, but I blocked his number in the evening. I decided it was time to talk to Tina. "Why did you do it? What was your goal? Did you get what you wanted after my exposure?" I asked. "Why did you cheat on me with my brother?" "I don't know, honestly," Tina began. "6 months ago, he started coming over a lot while you were at work. And at some point it just happened. We had sex. I was scared to tell you about it." "You're lying," I objected. "The pictures show the time you spent together and how well you got along. Are you saying it was all an illusion? You spent more time with him in a week and a half than we did together in that time." "I understand how it all seems. I'm sorry. I made a mistake. You've already punished me for it. Peter doesn't bother me anymore, but that's no reason for us to divorce." "Wait, you think after everything that's happened we're going to stay together?" I almost laughed. "That's funny. Why did you stay in the house then, even though you could have left?" Tina said. "Yeah, I stayed because I was afraid to leave the kids with you. I didn't know what to expect from you. Do you love me?" At that moment, I realized it was pointless to continue talking to Tina. She was acting illogical. I went and gathered the kids. She tried to stop me, but I told her I was taking them to their grandparents. Tina started raising her voice and yelling at me and hitting dishes, claiming I had ruined her life. I didn't miss the chance to record her behavior on my phone. She started accusing me of trying to steal her children from her, even though I just wanted to take them to their grandparents. Chaos ensued as the kids joined in with Tina's screams, and I felt like I was in the madhouse I called my own. I called my dad and asked him to come help me. Eventually, we were able to pick up the kids and bring them to his house. I stayed at my parents' house with the kids. My father said that Peter would not show up here. He had sent him to another city. Tina showed up at my parents' house the next day with the police to take the kids, but alas, she was unsuccessful, at least until there was a court order. My divorce papers had already been filed after months of preparation and numerous meetings with attorneys. I spent the night before the hearing pondering all the possible outcomes. It felt like I was facing an exam that touched the deepest corners of my soul. The trial was held in a small room. The atmosphere was tense, but at the same time strangely formal and detached. It seemed as if the process that was to determine the future of my family had been reduced to a list of formalities and legal terms. My interests were represented by my attorney, an experienced family law specialist. We prepared reasoned arguments on every point of property division and child custody. Tina came with her attorney, and I could see that she was having a hard time as well. For a moment, our gazes met, and I felt a mixture of bitterness and regret. The judge scrutinized the documents presented, listened to both sides, and asked a few questions about our divorce decree and the grounds for it. Tina was in a losing position because of the accusations of adultery. However, I decided not to show the tape of Tina hitting dishes and screaming in court. In the end, Tina got custody of our children and she kept the house. I did not take anything away from her and did not seek to further disrupt her life. It was important to me that she take care of our children, as I realized that I would not be able to give them as much attention as Tina could. The most important thing to me was for the children to be safe. Over the course of the trial, Tina came to terms with the fact that our marriage was inevitably going to break up. I continued to feel a deep resentment toward Tina and could not forgive her. My brother was no longer in our lives. Tina brought the kids to my parents on weekends, which gave me a chance to see them without crossing paths with Tina. I could have made life even more difficult for Tina, but I didn't, as it wouldn't have done me any good. Tina was a good mom, but she got what she deserved. She was very embarrassed in front of her in-laws and parents. Thank you for listening to my story. This is the end. Do you think the main character did the right thing by deciding to divorce his wife? Was he able to forgive her? Why did the wife decide to cheat on her husband with his brother? Was the brother the initiator of all this? Share your opinion in the comments. We will be interested to know your point of view. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and put a like so you won't miss new, even more exciting stories. We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button. Also, I am very interested to know your personal opinion about this story. You can write it in the comments. I will definitely read it and reply to you personally.